Hi, I'm Yelena, and in this video, we'll sew this beautiful tote bag together. Whether you're a beginner or just love mindful sewing, this step-by-step tutorial will guide you through the entire process. All versions of the Lily Tote follow the same construction steps. The only differences are small. The mini size doesn't include a pocket. The mini and tween sizes don't require a key leash. And the weekend version features a double interior pocket with a center dividing stitch. Everything else is identical. So feel free to follow this tutorial no matter which size you've purchased. Before we start sewing, let me walk you through a few things in your printed pattern. Each pattern includes a test square, and that's the very first thing to check. You can measure it in centimeters or inches, depending on your measuring system. You'll also notice a dotted rectangle on every page. That's your cutting guide, along with diamond-shaped alignment marks. I use a paper trimmer for this step. It helps me trim the pages quickly and neatly. Once trimmed, line up the diamond-shaped marks and the pattern lines. Make sure everything matches up perfectly before taping the pages together. When you cut out all the pieces, you'll see that each one is clearly labeled. It shows the grain line, the fabric type, and how many pieces you need to cut. And don't skip the grain line. It really does affect the final result. Now, a few words about the materials. I'm using a universal batting. It holds its shape where needed, but also presses down well with an iron. You'll find the recommended weight and details in the materials needed section of your guide. For the exterior fabric, I'm using a medium weight cotton. And for the lining, a lightweight cotton. Here you can clearly see the difference between the crosswise and lengthwise grain. So, let's get started. Mark the center on each strap piece using the notches as your guide. You can either draw a line with a fabric marker or simply fold the strap in half to create a crease. This is how I prepare all the pieces. Next, use that center line as a reference and press the long edges toward the center. It's easiest to press one side first, then the other. Repeat the same process for all strap pieces. Here's how they should look once everything is pressed and ready to go. Place two strap pieces together with the folded edges facing inward. Make sure the sides are carefully aligned, then pin them in place. If you're a beginner, you can baste the straps by hand to keep the layers from shifting while sewing. Sew along both sides of the strap, about 1 to 2 millimeters from the edge. That's roughly 1/16 of an inch. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Here's how the straps should look before pressing. Now, press them with steam to set the stitches and flatten the edges. Take the pocket piece and fold it along the notches. Press the fold in place. This will help shape the top edge of the pocket. This fold creates the first crease for the finished edge. Fold the top edge inward again, using the crease as a guide. Then press it to hold the shape in place. This will give the pocket a clean and sturdy top edge. Top stitch about 3/4 to 13/16 of an inch, or 1.8 to 2 centimeters, from the top edge to secure the fold. Sew from the right side using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Here's how the seam looks before pressing. Now press it to flatten and set the stitches. Now we need to fold and press both side edges of the pocket, turning them in by 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter. If you're a beginner, here's a little tip to help keep the fold straight. Draw a line parallel to the raw edge at twice the distance. That's about 3/4 of an inch, or 2 centimeters in this case. Then fold the edge over to meet the line and press. Do the same on the other side. To cool the crease quickly and keep it flat, I like to use a pressing roll, but any tool you have on hand will work just fine. Fold the bottom edge up by 3/8 of an inch, or 1 centimeter, and press. You can use the same tip here as before. Draw a guideline if that helps you keep the fold straight. I'm also using a pressing roll to cool the crease and lock it in place. And here's the finished pocket. All edges are neatly pressed and ready to go. Take the key leash piece and fold it in half lengthwise. Then press the fold to create a clean crease down the center. Now fold the raw edges toward the center crease and press again. This creates a clean, narrow strap. Here's how it looks. Top stitch along both long sides about 1 to 2 millimeters from the edge. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Here's how the finished key leash looks. Slide the swivel hook onto the strap. Make sure it moves freely and isn't twisted. Fold one short edge of the strap by 1 inch, or 2.5 centimeters. Then stitch close to the swivel hook, as close as possible. I'm using a zipper foot here. I also like to start sewing from the center of the strap. This helps prevent the layers from shifting. I lower the needle right in the middle. Sew forward, then back, then forward again, and finally back to the center, where I finish with a back stitch. Here's how it looks when finished. First, tuck the raw edge into the fold to hide it inside. To help with the thick layers, I'm using a hump jumper. This little tool helps the presser foot stay level and glide smoothly. I place the jumper under the back of the foot, lower the needle into the center, and sew forward, back, forward again, and back to the center to finish with a strong back stitch. Don't rush this step. Take your time for a clean finish. And here's how it looks. For the next step, place the lining piece on top of the batting, leaving about 1 inch or 2 centimeters of extra space at the bottom, and a little room on the sides as well. Most of the excess batting should be at the top of the piece. This is where we'll later attach the facing. To mark the first quilting line, start by finding the center of the piece. I'm simply folding the fabric in half and pressing it lightly to leave a crease. In my case, the fabric's pattern helps me align everything easily. If you're a beginner, you can draw a vertical line with a fabric marker, using the notches as a guide. Once the line is marked, pin the layers together to keep them from shifting while quilting. Sew along the center line using the longest stitch length on your machine. In my case, that's 5 millimeters. This will be your first quilting line, so take your time and keep it straight. Continue quilting in both directions, keeping 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters between each line. Once all the lines are stitched, steam press the quilted piece to flatten and set the texture. And here's how it looks. Evenly quilted and nice and smooth. First, place the facing piece on top of the lining, right side up, positioning it over the extra batting at the top. Match the center notch on the facing with the center notch on the lining. You may notice that the facing is slightly longer than the quilted lining. That's totally normal. Quilting tends to shrink the fabric just a bit. Don't worry if the side edges don't match perfectly. Focus on the center. Then pin the pieces together. Before sewing, we need to add the key leash between the facing and lining layers. I like to place it near the future strap location, so I take the printed pattern piece and mark the approximate position of the strap. I usually place the key leash close to the outer side of the strap. Once that's marked, I take my finished key leash and insert it between the right sides of the facing and lining. I pin it in place right at the mark. And now we're ready to sew along this edge. Sew the facing and lining together along the top edge using a 3/8 inch, or 1 centimeter, seam allowance. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and end to secure the seam. Sew an extra line of stitching to reinforce the key leash attachment. If your machine has a triple stitch function, this is a great place to use it. And as always, don't forget to backstitch. Here's the result: strong and secure. First, press the seam as it is. Then flip the facing over to the right side. Press the edge well. I'm using a pressing roll to help set the shape. Now, top stitch 2 to 3 millimeters from the fold, sewing from the right side. And here's how the finished top stitching looks. Next, we'll stabilize the facing. Sew along the top and both side edges, about 3 to 5 millimeters from the edge, to secure the facing to the batting. Use the longest stitch length on your machine. And no need to backstitch here. This will help keep everything flat and in place during final assembly. Here's the result. Now press thoroughly to set the seam and shape. Trim the excess batting along all sides, making it flush with the edges of the fabric. This helps reduce bulk and keeps the layers even. And here's the result. All sides are nice and clean. Now repeat the same for the second lining piece. Mine is already prepared and looks just the same, only without the key leash. Let's place the pocket onto one of the lining pieces. I'm using the printed pattern piece to mark the placement. I fold the paper along the pocket guideline, then align the bottom edge of the lining with the pattern, using the center notch as a reference point. I mark the top corners of the pocket with a fabric marker. Now I place the actual pocket on the lining. I gently adjust the pocket. I want the print to line up with the main piece as closely as possible. Once I'm happy with the placement, I pin the pocket in place. Sew around the sides and bottom of the pocket, 2 to 3 millimeters from the edge, using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Here's how it looks once stitched. Add a second stitch line, parallel to the first one, 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter from the edge. To reinforce the top corners, I start with a horizontal bar tack across the pocket opening, just a few millimeters below the top edge. Then, with the needle down, I pivot the fabric and sew down along the side, around the bottom, and back up the other side. I finish the seam with another horizontal bar tack at the opposite top corner. And now press the pocket with steam to set everything in place. If you're making the Lily Weekend tote, this pocket has a center divider. To add it, simply stitch a vertical line down the middle, starting from the bottom edge and sewing up toward the top. Be sure to backstitch at both ends to keep the seam secure. Starting from the bottom helps you keep the fabric flat and the seam nice and straight. For this next step, start by transferring the side markings from the pattern. These marks will help you leave a turning opening later. Then place the two lining pieces right sides together. Now align the seams where the facing meets the lining. It's important that these match up perfectly. To do this, insert a pin directly through the seam on one piece and make sure it comes out exactly through the seam on the other. After that, pin the rest of the edges around the lining. And just a note, leave the inner corners unpinned for now. We'll sew those later. Stitch along the sides and bottom of the lining using a 3/8 inch, or 1 centimeter, seam allowance. Leave the inner corners unsewn and be sure to leave a turning hole on one side. You'll need it to turn the bag right side out later. Use steam to press the seams you've just sewn. I'm using a tailor's ham with a narrow collar edge. It helps open the seams cleanly, especially in tight areas. You can also use a pressing roll or seam cushion like the one I showed earlier. It works just as well for pressing seams open. Take your time and repeat the process along the entire seam. Now I flip the facing section out, and you can see that the seams align perfectly. That's why we took extra care during pinning. Let's shape the inner corners. Open up the corner and align the bottom seam with the side seam. Just like before, insert a pin straight through the seam on one side, making sure it comes out through the seam on the other side. This helps the intersection match up perfectly. Pin it back in place and add a few more pins on each side to secure the layers. Sew along the corner seam with a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. I'm showing just one corner here, since they're all stitched the same way. Press the corner seams from the inside first, then flip the lining over and press from the outside. Take a moment to check the seam. It should match perfectly and look clean and professional. And with that, the lining is ready. Take the two exterior pieces and place them right sides together. Align the edges and pin along both sides and the bottom. This will become the outside of the bag. Sew along the sides and bottom using a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Leave the inner corners unsewn. We'll take care of them in the next steps. Just like we did with the lining, start by pressing the seams you've just sewn. Then use a tailor's ham or sleeve board to press the seam allowances open for a clean, professional finish. Take your time and open the seams fully as you go. Let's shape the exterior corners. We're doing the same steps as with the lining. Open up the corner and align the side and bottom seams by matching the center points. Insert a pin straight through the seams to make sure they align perfectly. Then pin it back in place and add a couple more pins on each side to secure the layers. Sew the corner seam with a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. I'm showing just one corner here, since both sides are constructed the same way. Press the corner seams from the wrong side first, then turn the exterior right side out and press from the outside. This helps flatten the seam and shape the corners. Place the straps on the exterior fabric right side up, aligning them with the placement marks from the pattern. Then shift each strap up by about a 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimeter. Temporarily pin both straps in place. Make sure the straps aren't twisted. Double-check the direction. On the back side, I take a moment to adjust the print on the strap so that it visually continues the pattern from the bag body. If you're using a solid fabric, you can skip this step. Once you're happy with the placement, baste the straps 5 millimeters from the edge of the exterior panel. Top stitch the straps 1/4 inch or 0.5 centimeters from the edge of the exterior panel. If your machine has a reinforced stitch, use it here. Otherwise, sew back and forth 2 to 3 times to secure the straps in place. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. This isn't the final stitch. We'll reinforce the straps again when attaching the lining and during top stitching. Here's a quick look at the finished result. From both sides, place the lining over the exterior, right sides together. Start by matching the side seams. Use a pin to go through one seam and out exactly through the other, so the seams align perfectly. Then match the center notches and pin all around the top edge. Near the straps, I pin the fabric just to the side of the strap layers. This helps avoid bulky seams and keeps the edge smooth. Now it's time to sew around the top edge with a joining seam. Sew around the top edge with a 3/8 inch, or 1 centimeter, seam allowance. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. As you sew, gently smooth the fabric forward to prevent shifting or puckering. This is especially important with layered seams. When you reach the end, overlap your stitching by about 3/4 of an inch, or 2 centimeters, to secure the seam. Don't forget to backstitch. Then give the seam a good press. Turn the bag right side out through the opening in the lining. I'm checking how the seams align. Some areas match perfectly, and some are slightly off due to the fabric's irregular print and unstable cross-grain. What matters most is how it looks on the outside. And on the front, the alignment is right where I want it. Now tuck the lining inside the bag, smooth out the top edge, and press the seam carefully using steam. I'm using pressing tools here just for convenience while filming, but you can absolutely press this seam on a regular ironing board. There's no need for special equipment. Top stitch along the top edge of the bag, 3/8 of an inch, or 1 centimeter, from the edge. This final stitch helps secure the straps and gives the bag a clean, finished look. I'm using a 3 to 3.5 millimeter stitch length. After sewing, press the seam thoroughly. Once again, no special pressing tools are needed. An ironing board will work just fine. This step is totally optional, but it's one of my favorite little tricks. It helps your tote keep its shape, especially at the bottom corners. To keep the lining from shifting around inside the bag, and to help the base stay nice and crisp, we're going to secure the seam allowances of the lining and the outer shell together, right at the bottom corner. I'll start by showing this on small fabric samples, so it's easier to see what's actually going on inside the finished bag. Once the bag is shaped, the seam allowances naturally fold at a 45-degree angle at each corner. The goal is to align the corner seams so they sit right on top of each other, and make sure the seam allowances are both pointing down toward the base of the bag, not out toward the sides. First, reach through the opening in the lining and grab the opposite corner, the one farthest from the hole. Gently pull it out through the opening so it's easier to work with. Hold both seam allowances together and bring them out. Now place the layers back to back and match the corner seams. Make sure the allowances are facing down, toward the bottom of the bag, and pin them together securely. Then stitch the seam allowances together, keeping close to the edge, about 1/4 inch, 0.5 to 0.7 centimeters, away from the original seam. Do not sew over the original seam. We're staying just outside of it. This stitch won't be visible from the outside, but it locks the layers in place and keeps the base stable. Once you've finished, push the corner back inside. You'll feel the difference. It's subtle, but it gives a really clean, structured result. Now reach in again and find the second corner, the one right next to the opening in the lining. Fold the seam allowances inward just like before. There's one small difference here. You'll need to gently rotate the seam so the allowances also point down toward the base, not toward the side seam. That rotation is important. It helps the bottom stay flat and even. To do that, twist the corner slightly, align the seams, and pin the allowances together. Once everything is aligned, sew the seam allowances together again, about 1/4 inch or 0.5 to 0.7 centimeters from the edge, staying clear of the original seam. Tuck the corner back inside and smooth it out. You'll immediately notice how much better the bag holds its shape. Now let's close the turning hole. I prefer doing this by hand using a ladder stitch, It gives a clean, invisible finish. You can also do it by machine, about 1/16 inch, 2 millimeters from the edge if you prefer. I'm using a double thread and starting with a loop instead of a knot. This helps avoid bulk and keeps things tidy. The stitches are about 1/8 to 3/16 inches, 3 to 5 millimeters, and I alternate sides like a ladder. Stitch into the fold on one side, then into the fold on the other. Once I reach the end, I pull the thread gently to close the gap. The stitches disappear inside. Then I tie a small knot to secure the thread. Next, I gently bury the thread tail into the lining, slipping the needle through the fabric layers, so nothing is visible from the outside. The seam is now completely hidden, and the bag is officially finished. Now let's sew these beautiful bows. They'll give your bag that special finishing touch. Fold the bow piece in half lengthwise, right sides together, and pin along the edge. Don't forget to leave a small gap in the center. We'll use it to turn the bow right side out later. Sew along the long edge with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, leaving a 4-inch gap in the center for turning. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length and don't forget to backstitch at both ends of the opening. First, press the seam flat. But be careful not to crease the center fold. We only want to press the seam itself. Then gently open the bow and press the seam allowances open along the entire length. Flatten the bow so the seam runs down the center on the back. Align the angled short edges. They should match up perfectly. Pin both sides in place. Sew both short edges with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length and backstitch at the beginning and end. Cut the seam allowance diagonally across each corner, leaving about 1/16 inch, 2 millimeters from the seam. This will help create sharp corners when turning the bow right side out. Start by turning the bow right side out and carefully shape the corners. In the main instruction, pressing comes before hand sewing, but both ways work just fine. I'll first close the opening by hand and then give the bow a final press to set the shape. Thread your needle with a double strand of thread and tie a small knot, or use the loop method. I prefer this method because it creates a cleaner finish without bulky knots. Stitch across the opening using an invisible ladder stitch. Once done, gently pull the thread to close the gap, make 2 small securing knots, and hide the tail inside the seam. Now it's time to press the bow for a crisp, polished look. Now let's tie the bow. I'm using the simplest method, just like tying shoelaces. Take your time to shape it nicely. Adjust the loops and ends so the bow looks fluffy and symmetrical. Make sure the seam stays hidden on the back side for a clean finish. I'm using a double thread in a matching color to secure the bow. First, I make a small anchoring stitch in the center to lock the knot in place. Then, I gently stitch the layers together using tiny invisible stitches, especially where the folds touch. Make sure the front stays neat. it's okay if something shows on the backside. This step helps keep the bow from coming undone and allows it to hold its shape over time. And just like that, your soft, relaxed bow is finished. You can also try other bow styles. This one is the easiest to start with. Now it's time to attach the finished bows to the bag. I position each bow directly opposite the straps, ensuring they align on the same horizontal line for a balanced look. There are 2 ways to secure the bows. You can hand stitch them in place using a few invisible stitches to keep the bow from coming undone. Or you can use safety pins, which I prefer since they let me easily swap bows for a fresh style. If your fabric is slippery, you might add a few extra stitches for added security. Either method will hold the bow firmly in place and give your bag a polished finish. You did it. Your Lily Tote is complete. I hope this project brought you joy and a little spark of inspiration. I'd absolutely love to see your version. Tag me on Instagram so I can cheer you on. And if this pattern made your sewing time extra special, I'd be so grateful for a kind review. Thanks for joining me. And until next time, happy sewing!